Tom, I wanted to start with this story here on housing and the fact that the federal government's making some changes now to two of its biggest housing programs. This in the wake of a story suggesting now that markets, at least housing markets residentially, are starting to sort of come down a little bit. Fewer transactions, maybe interest rates had something to do with that. Yeah. And also the fact that the price of housing is starting to come down as well. Is this the beginning of a solution? Why is the government doing this now?
You know, Aaron, one of the things that I've learned in many years in government is that there are very few politicians who actually pay any attention to the details of their programs. What's happening here is a reaction to something that Pierre Poilievre has been doing for the past couple of months. He's got a lot of young people who usually vote Liberal saying they want more Pierre Poilievre, and he's promising to get the red tape out of the way, to start plowing up fields, building more housing, and affordability has become a huge issue, and a subset of that, of course, is affordable housing. So lo and behold, the same bureaucrats who have been pushing the same programs for the same politicians for years and years are being told, wake up, your stuff's not working. What you call affordable is not, because very often once you've larded on all the extra government expenses, these rental units actually wind up costing more than anything else in that market. So, you know, it's a wake-up call, and the government's finally getting it right.
Do we not consider Pierre Poilievre, though, to be part of the problem in so much that he and his wife own properties and make rental income off of that, and so it kind of drives prices up? So I don't know. I feel like this is an avoidance tactic for him.
It is to a certain extent, but I have to tell you that Poilievre is onto something.
So when you say onto something with respect to what this idea that, you know, housing is an issue, I mean, every party is onto that story.
Every party's onto that story, but Poilievre's the only one talking to young people. Look, they care about the environment. Okay. They care about social issues. They care about economic issues, but now they've got somebody who's fighting in their corner. Trudeau's had the exact same programs. He's had all that information for a long time. He's done two things in the past 48 hours. He's decided that he's going to reintroduce some new legislation, which has never been there since 1988 when the Canadian Supreme Court ruled to throw out our old legislation on abortion. We've never needed new legislation. We get the information out of the United States that Roe v. Wade is about to be thrown under the bus, and lo and behold, today they announced that we need new legislation in Canada on abortion. This is a way to have a political fight about abortion with the Conservatives. And here on housing, they realize the Conservatives are stealing their lunch. They're going to come up with new programs. They're going to beat up the civil servants who have not been doing a good job building affordable housing. It's a political reaction to a new political reality, which is a populist candidate talking to young people who would normally be beholden to the Liberal Party and that they're about to lose unless they figure out how to deal with Poilievre. And that's what they're trying to do here.
All right, I want to just shift focus. I know the Ontario provincial election, the campaign has already begun. We kind of talked around this yesterday. I heard Evan earlier today, and I found this fascinating because you know that Quebec, where we're still, 6 months away roughly from an election here,
yep.
A lot of the signals from Ontario will, I'm sure, be noticed here in Quebec. Mm-hmm. So they asked people what they were concerned with, what the prime issues were for them in a vote. So cost of living, inflation, housing, the economy, those four did not even add up to what the number one issue is, and that's health care, which came in at an average of about 27%. And I'm wondering, wow, if that's going to be the big issue in Ontario, I'm imagining it's got to be the big issue here, or am I wrong?
I think it might be slightly different here. We're coming off the pandemic. People know that we made a hash of it, especially in the first wave. But as we're coming out of the pandemic, and we'll be 6 months down the road, I don't think it'll be as lively an issue as it is now in Ontario. With regard to the percentages, that polling shows that health is the top priority for about 26% of the population. But if you do take affordability and housing, you're and inflation, you're almost at exactly the same amount because they separated out. Every one of those only gets one line. So if you look at writ large, the affordability issues, then I think that we're pretty darn close. I think that that's a sea change because in the past you would have, especially here in Quebec, you've had subjects like environment very high up that list. Well, I have to tell you, something fascinating is taking place in the environmental world. It's a world where I teach and I work a lot as a volunteer. There's a massive demobilization being felt right now. And it's because Stephen Guilbeault, who everybody saw as the knight in shining armor who was going to be out there fighting for the environment, basically sold out when he approved the Bay du Nord project, this massive offshore oil project with no possible rationalization for it other than trying to keep the oil sector happy. And people show up to events where he comes, and they don't scream at him. They just go, with their palms turned towards the heavens, like, what were you thinking? And it's been a real sea change here in Canada, because right now there's nobody talking to environment. In the Ontario election that you just referenced, Aaron, the Green Party is like 5%. So they're not even going to register on the screen. I mean, they're not even going to get a single person elected in the Ontario election. And it's a sad thing, because it's not an issue for the other mainstream parties. So it's completely being lost. But again, young people who care about that, they express their interest, for example, in the NDP the same way they did for Singh. But Andrea Horwath, the head of the Ontario NDP, her numbers are good. She's right up there with the Liberals, but she's number one choice of 18 to 34-year-olds. But as we learned in the last election, they don't vote. So you have to really take a lot of these numbers with a grain of salt and dig down into them to know what's really going on. I think, for example, in Ontario, Doug Ford is sitting pretty exactly like François Legault. He's got an almost perfect split in his opposition parties, the NDP and the Liberals at 25 and 26 respectively, and he's in the 40 zone just like Legault is. He'll win a majority in a romp.
That's so crazy, because I think back 6 months ago, and we were, Doug Ford this and Doug Ford that. He didn't stand a hope. There was and all of a sudden that's all off the table, and now he's going to win in a romp. It's kind of crazy.
Well, what's also interesting is he's going to win by tacking completely left. So he's not going to leave the progressive vote. He knows that his base knows who he is.
Yeah.
They know he's Doug Ford. They know what he stands for. He doesn't have to attract them. They're going to vote for him. But he is going completely left in terms of social issues. On the environment, he's a bit softer. He's going to get caught a little bit on abortion, because there's no way for him to continue dancing around on this. He's going to get nailed down on this one, probably more by Horwath than by Del Duca, who's the leader of the Liberals. But he's doing an incredible job of changing who he is. He ran 4 years ago as the guy who was going to beat up the government and bring all the bureaucrats to heel and lower your taxes and get you beer, $1, a buck a beer. That was his big campaign promise. He kept it.
Kind of crazy, as I said. All right.
That'll be interesting to see how he dances around the abortion issue. Just back to Stephen Guilbeault for a quick second. Tom, I'm wondering, do you think he's having trouble sleeping at night? Like, is he beat up inside over the decisions he's had to be a part of?
Well, interestingly enough, when he announced this abysmal decision, he talked about himself. Oh, this is so hard for me, so hard for me. And I listening to it on the radio, actually, and I was talking to my radio alone in the car saying, really? It's not about you. It's about future generations. It's about our children and our grandchildren, because it's the type of planet we're going to leave for them. And I've known the guy for decades, and I've always had a lot of time for him. But on this one, I mean, oh wow, it's a rather spectacular sellout.
So he should have trouble sleeping at night, in other words.
Yeah, but I don't think he does. To answer your question, I don't get the impression that it really bugs him, because he's convinced himself that he's got a plan that will sort of kick in years and years down the road that will somehow magically reduce our greenhouse gas emissions in Canada. But the problem, of course, is a future government could easily just stir up that plan. Canada has one of the worst records in the world. We are the first country to have withdrawn from the Kyoto Protocol when that was on the books. We have the worst record in the G7 since the signature by Mr. Trudeau in 2015. He signed the Paris Accord to lower greenhouse gases. We've had the worst record in the G7. And of all of the countries in the world, we have one of the worst records of greenhouse gas production per capita. Canadians always sort of go, oh, nice big country, we should be okay. We're probably doing all right on the environment. But on these big international obligations, we're just not there.
We have a lot of trees, though, Tom. There's lots and lots of trees.
And,
we're very good with trees,
The billion trees that Mr. Trudeau promised during the 2019 election, the number that got planted is pretty close to zero.
Tom, we're going to run out of time. I want to get a quick take on this. So Canada now becoming one of the first countries in the world to require online crowdfunding platforms to report its anti-money laundering and terrorist finance, to report their activities, if you will, to FinTrack. I guess we can owe all this to the original Freedom Convoy.
Yep. And you know what? Canada's right. And I think other countries are going to be following suit. You've got to adapt your institutions to new reality. Who would have thought just a couple of years ago that almost overnight, an absolutely unknown person in Western Canada goes before the cameras. She says, "Oh, send money to this address, and I'm going to send it to the convoy, and we're going to go take over Ottawa, and we won't leave until the government resigns." I mean, who would have thought that possible? So when you realize that all of a sudden a lot of that money was coming in from foreign countries in general, the United States in particular, then Canada has every right to say, well, hold on. No, we're not going to allow foreigners to come and finance this type of activity in Canada. You're Canadian, you want to protest? Welcome to a free country. You're from the outside and you want to foment trouble here? We're going to check where the money's coming from and where it's going, and it's going to go under the umbrella of dealing with other troublemakers that we already have in our financial system. And I think the government is completely right on this one.
Right.
Although Elon Musk will disagree, and once again, he'll use horrible words against Trudeau when he called him, I think he called him a fascist, if not worse.
Oh, please.
Well, that's good to know. Thank you, Elon. Thank you, Tom.
Take care, guys.
Talk to you tomorrow.